I walked into the room holding a small gift bag, the paper crinkling in my hand. The place smelled of fried food and lilies. My mother sat at the head table under a banner that read 60 and fabulous. Laughter filled the air. I smiled and lifted the bag like any polite guest. The music slowed and the chatter stopped all at once. Someone dropped a glass. A chair scraped. My mother's face went white as linen. "You're supposed to be dead," someone screamed from the back, and the words bounced off the balloons. My mother's hand slipped and the wine tipped across her lap. She stood too fast and then sagged back in dramatic faint. People crowded around. Hands flew to phones. Someone whispered, "We saw the obituary online." Another voice said, "How could she do that?" I set the bag down carefully on the table. The room cooled like a freezer door opening. My heart was a slow drum. I felt the air, heavy with looks I used to know. I heard my father's laugh from years ago, ghost soft. I didn't move toward her. I let the hush grow until all eyes settled on me like maps. I tapped the bag's ribbon with one finger and the sound cut the silence small and sharp. "Surprise, Mom," I said, and the words were not soft. People stared at my face, searching for the actress in my voice. The woman who had worn my life like a coat lay on the chair with hands crossed over empty lap. Someone called for water. Someone asked whether we should call a doctor. My mother's friends folded their faces into shocked sympathy. I smiled a slow, cold smile that did not reach my eyes. In that smile lived 10 months of questions, of bank slips, of a dead life I had to prove was false. The bag at my feet waited, its flap tight like a secret mouth. The room buzzed like a beehive, full of small, stunned sounds. My mother's friends circled like puzzled birds. She said she lost her daughter in a crash, a woman whispered to the men beside her, as if whispering could stitch a lie back together. My mother lay still and then began to breathe shallow, a practiced faint that smelled of perfume and attention. A friend pressed a cool handkerchief to her forehead. I watched them move. Every hand that reached for my mother had once patted my cheek. Their whispers were honeyed daggers. I listened and heard 1,000 small phrases I'd never wanted to hear about myself. What a brave woman she was, how brave mothers survive. People who had never knocked on my door now boasted of sending flowers. Their voices floated like small boats on a river I thought I owned. I kept my face calm. I let them wave their condolences like a flag and fold me into history without my permission. When the woman holding the handkerchief leaned in close and murmured, "I'm so sorry for your loss," I opened my mouth and let a different sound fall out, cold and even. "Thank you," I said, and smiled in a way that felt like steel. My mother's faint was a show. Her face was powdered and perfect. Her lips were glossy. She looked at me as if at a ghost, and then that look slid into panic when she noticed me standing there alive. Someone gasped and someone else laughed nervously. My mother's hands fluttered as if arranged by a director. She's been cashing the checks, I thought, the idea snapping into place like bone. The room spun a little. I felt the beginning of a plan tighten in my chest like a rope. I placed the gift bag on the table with careful hands. The paper rustled. Faces leaned close like curious children. I said nothing as I unrolled the tissue and pulled out the first thing, a death certificate printed with my name. The room inhaled. The paper looked official, stamps, seals, the crooked signature someone had copied from my old letters. I held it up so they could see. Murmurs unfurled like a ribbon. Next I showed others, forms from the insurance company, a stack of bank withdrawal slips, copies of emails to charities thanking my mother for her courage and donations in my memory. Each paper landed on the table with the sound of a verdict. The polite circle around us stepped back as if afraid the evidence might burn. My mother's face changed color like weather. Her hands fumbled for an explanation that would not come. In the doorway, a few of her friends looked at me with a new expression, horror and betrayal woven together. "This has to be a mistake," one woman whispered. "How could she do this?" Another held up her phone and said, "Call the police." I smiled very slowly. The phone on the table buzzed with a ringtone I had set to the investigator's number. Outside, a distant wail began, the keening sound of sirens. It grew louder, folding itself into the room like a curtain. People scrambled for shoes, for coats, for composure. My mother's faint was over, replaced by shrill anger. She stood, voice thin as glass, and said, "This is a cruel prank." I looked her straight in the eyes and then I heard the sirens fold into the hall and the sound of truth walk through the door. I remembered the first time I saw my own obituary. It was 2 months ago, a headline on my phone that felt like a slap: Emily Hart, beloved daughter killed in crash. Friends posted black ribbons. Condolences poured in. I was halfway across the ocean then, working a contract that kept me from home. I thought it was a cruel scam at first. Then messages from strangers began to read like a funeral program. I flew home to tidy up the life no one had asked me to leave. My apartment door opened to empty rooms. My wardrobe had been cleared, familiar frames were gone from the wall. The landlord sat me down and said, "She told me you passed. She handled your estate." He pushed a small box across the table like it was a relic. Inside was a small tin labeled with my name. "Your cremains," he said, voice soft, as if the life in the tin might melt back into me. I laughed then, not the kind of laughter that heals. I laughed at the absurd idea that ashes could be forged. I realized someone had made a story of my death and sold it to the world. People had written things about grieving mothers and brave survivors. There were comments beneath the fake obituary, some cruel, some kind. "She kept her dignity, what a strong mother." Each line read like salt in a wound. When I stood at the kitchen window that evening, the city lights looked like little eyes that had watched me be erased. I felt the cold clarity again. Someone I loved had declared me gone and had taken everything in my absence. Please subscribe, like and share for more, thanks. The landlord gave me a box of papers when I asked about my documents. He said the woman who claimed my death had left instructions to clear out my things. I sat on a motel bed with the lamp low and opened the box. There were papers stamped with other names, a key that fit no lock I knew, and a small tin that smelled faintly of smoke. The bottom of the tin was labeled with my name in my mother's slanted hand. My stomach turned at the sight. I went to the bank the next morning. The teller blinked when I slid my ID across. She went quiet and then returned with a folder full of transactions. "Your death benefits were released months ago to the next of kin," she said. "We have a withdrawal here, your mother signed." My mouth dried. She showed me a printed signature that looked like mine but shivered wrong. "She came in person," the teller added. "She took everything." The folder felt heavy like a stone. My phone call to the insurance office came next. The voice on the line told me the name on file for the death certificate had been verified with a copy of my ID sent by fax. I felt like a puppet whose strings had been cut and remade by someone else. "Technically," the agent said, voice clipped, "we have no record of you being alive under this file." I laughed then, a short sound that tasted of iron. "Technically?" I asked. "And what does that make me?" She answered, "Ma'am, it's complicated." I hung up and stared at the peeling motel wallpaper. The world felt like a paper stage where someone had already set the props and declared the act over. I pressed my forehead to my hand and whispered, "Who do I become when the world writes me out?" I stayed awake that night, staring at the ceiling of my small motel room. The hum of the air conditioner was the only thing that sounded alive. Somewhere between midnight and morning, I made a decision: I couldn't stay invisible. I needed proof, not grief. At dawn, I walked into the insurance office. The clerk behind the counter looked at my ID, frowned, and disappeared into a back room. When she returned, a man in a suit followed her. He studied me like I was an illusion. "Miss Hart," he said slowly, "according to our files, you're deceased." "I can assure you I'm not," I replied. He sighed and tapped his pen. "Your mother presented a notarized death certificate and proof of kinship. Benefits were released to her 6 months ago." "How much?" He hesitated. "Everything tied to your pension, your savings, and your life policy." I felt my throat tighten. "And you didn't think to verify it?" He looked embarrassed. "Your mother submitted photographs of the funeral." I swallowed hard. "I see." The man leaned forward. "You'll need a lawyer to dispute this. But until that's processed, legally, I don't exist," I finished for him. He nodded. When I stepped outside, the sunlight hit my face like accusation. People brushed past, unaware that I was a ghost among them. I wanted to scream, but instead I walked quietly back to the motel. I counted every step. Each one felt like a promise. I would make her see me again, even if it meant tearing the lie apart with my own hands. I called my mother's house that evening, using a pay phone outside the gas station. When she answered, her voice was honey-sweet, practiced. "Hello." "Hi, Mom." The silence that followed was long and cold. "Who is this?" she asked finally. "Your dead daughter," I said. She hung up. I stood there holding the phone, hearing the faint click of the receiver like a door slamming on truth. I dialed again. No answer. That night, I sat on the motel bed with a takeout box on my lap and tears on my cheeks. My reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger's. I kept hearing her voice, so calm, so cruel. She had spoken my name to banks, insurance officers, lawyers. She'd forged my death and spent the money meant to bury me. My chest ached with something deeper than anger. It was grief, but not for my lost money, grief for the mother I thought I had. A knock came at the door around midnight. I froze. Then a man's voice said, "Emily Hart." I opened the door a crack. He was middle-aged, wearing a brown jacket and holding a folder. "My name's Adam Klein. I'm a private investigator. I think we need to talk." I blinked at him. "Who sent you?" "No one," he said. "I read your case file. You're not the first person your mother's done this to." I stepped aside to let him in. The clock ticked loudly. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to purpose stirring under my skin. Adam spread his folder across the small motel table. Photos, documents, bank records, my life arranged like evidence at a crime scene. He pointed to one. "Your mother's pattern is simple. She targets people who trust her. Family, mostly. She's cashed out 3 life policies before yours." My stomach turned. 3. He nodded. "A cousin. A great-aunt. All deceased on paper long before they actually were. You're the only one who came back." I stared at the papers, at the fake funeral photos she'd submitted, me in a hospital bed, face blurred, probably stolen from the internet. My throat tightened. "So, what do I do?" "You rebuild," he said. "You collect proof. You expose her when no one can deny it. I don't have anyone left to help." He smiled faintly. "You have me. And I don't like frauds." Over the next few days, Adam helped me gather everything, copies of signatures, transaction logs, email trails. He traced offshore accounts linked to my name but funneled into hers. On the 5th night, as we sat reviewing notes, he said, "We'll need to get close to her." I frowned. "How?" "She runs a charity foundation, right?" "Under her name?" "Yes. The Heart Hope Fund." "Then you're going to work there?" I looked at him, startled. "You want me to walk into her life again?" He nodded. "Under a new name. She killed Emily Hart. So we'll make someone new." The thought made my pulse quicken. Maybe ghosts could learn to walk among the living after all. 2 weeks later, I wasn't Emily Hart anymore. The new ID said Rachel Lee. My hair was darker, shorter. Adam had connections in data services. He made the paperwork real enough to pass scrutiny. Rachel was 29, with a clean background and charity experience. It felt strange introducing myself with that name, like slipping into a borrowed body. But it worked. Within a week, I had an interview at my mother's foundation. She didn't recognize me when I walked into her office. Her face was smooth and glowing with makeup. She looked younger than I remembered, richer too. "Rachel, is it?" she said, shaking my hand. "We could use more people with your background." Her hand was warm. I fought the urge to pull away. "Yes," I said. "I've always admired the work this charity does. Helping families rebuild after loss." Her eyes softened in false sadness. "Loss teaches gratitude, doesn't it?" I almost laughed. She showed me around. The walls were covered in photos of children and donors. Then I saw it, my own smiling face in a framed picture, labeled, "In loving memory of Emily Hart." I stopped breathing. She was my daughter, my mother said softly, glancing at the photo. My reason for all of this. I turned to her and smiled, the practiced smile of a stranger. She must have been wonderful. She nodded, eyes bright with crocodile tears. She was everything. Inside, I whispered to myself, she still is. Working at the foundation was like living inside a lie. Every file folder, every speech, every donor photo was built on my fake death. People praised my mother for her strength and philanthropy. She wore their sympathy like diamonds. At staff meetings, she spoke about Emily's legacy. I sat there taking notes, heart pounding. No one knew the ghost they were honoring sat 2 seats away. One afternoon, she invited the team to a luncheon for donors. I helped arrange tables and menus. While setting name cards, I overheard her telling a journalist, I lost my daughter in a tragic accident. But I turned that pain into purpose. The words hit me like shards. She wasn't grieving, she was performing. I kept my head down and whispered to the empty plates, you'll choke on that purpose one day. After the event, I slipped into her office. On her desk sat a velvet box. Inside was a gold locket, mine. The one my father had given me at 12. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, my childhood photo smiled back. Footsteps echoed down the hall. I quickly put it back. She entered moments later, humming. Working late, Rachel. Yes, I said smoothly. Just finishing reports. She smiled. You remind me of someone I used to know. I met her eyes. I get that a lot. When she left, I exhaled hard. The locket still burned in my memory. The daughter she buried was coming back, piece by piece, and soon, so would justice. The longer I worked there, the more lies I uncovered. My mother's foundation was a front for donations that never reached their supposed causes. Money vanished into administrative transfers, each one linked to a fake project name. Adam called it a sympathy machine. Every week, new checks came in, people donating in Emily's memory. Sometimes they even addressed the envelopes to me. My mother smiled as she opened them. People never forget tragedy, she said, sliding the checks into her drawer. She'd made me her product. One afternoon, I slipped into the storage room, pretending to look for supplies. On a high shelf sat a box labeled Memorial Campaign 2022. Inside were files with donor receipts and withdrawal records. I photographed every page, hands shaking. Each photo was a tiny piece of my resurrection. That night, Adam spread the photos on his motel bed. She's made a fortune off you, he said quietly. She turned me into a brand, I replied. He nodded. Then we'll make that brand her undoing. We devised a plan, gather enough evidence to expose her publicly. But I wasn't ready yet. Not until I could look her in the eye and watch her realize the ghost she'd built had come to collect. The next morning, I walked into her office, calm as ever. She smiled, offering me coffee. You're doing wonderful work, Rachel. Thank you, I said. I just want to make sure Emily's story lives on. She laughed lightly. You and me both, dear. If she noticed the edge in my smile, she didn't mention it. She loved to perform her grief. I learned that quickly. Every month, she held luncheons at hotels, standing under soft lights, voice trembling just enough to sound fragile. When I lost my daughter, she would begin, and the room would sigh. I attended each one, sitting quietly near the back, notebook in hand. Watching her became my study in deceit. One afternoon, the speech was worse than usual. She told them I died saving a stray dog from a speeding car. The crowd gasped. A woman dabbed her eyes with a napkin. My mother paused dramatically before showing a slideshow, photos of me from childhood to adulthood, ending with a picture of a burning candle. People stood to applaud. I felt the tears sting my eyes, but not from sadness. It was rage, dressed in disbelief. As the crowd dispersed, I followed her into the hotel lobby. She was laughing with donors, radiant in her grief. Around her neck, the gold locket glimmered, the one that had once rested on mine. I approached just close enough to hear a woman say, "You're such an inspiration, Mrs. Hart. You turned heartbreak into hope." My mother smiled. Loss makes us stronger, doesn't it? I whispered under my breath, or crueler. That evening, I returned to the motel, shaking with adrenaline. Adam listened as I spoke. She enjoys it, I said. She enjoys being the hero of my death. He looked thoughtful. Then we'll let her keep performing. But next time, the audience will change. I didn't know what he meant yet. But I knew it sounded like justice. It was at the foundation that I met him, Gerald. My mother's boyfriend. Charming, smug, too smooth for his own good. He was the kind of man who called every woman sweetheart and every lie business. The first day he visited, I caught the scent of his cologne before I saw him. "You must be the new assistant," he said, grinning. "Rachel, right?" "Yes," I replied, forcing a polite smile. He leaned on my desk. "You know, your boss talks about you a lot." "I'm sure she does." Later, Adam confirmed my suspicion. Gerald was the one who helped forge my death documents. He'd handled the fake notarization and bank authorizations. I felt sick. "He knows everything." "Good," Adam said. "Then get him to talk." So I did. Over the next few weeks, I played the part perfectly, friendly, flattered, curious. I laughed at his jokes, accepted his coffee invites, let him think I was another admirer orbiting his charm. One night, after too many drinks at a rooftop bar, he said, "You know, it's amazing what people will sign when they're grieving." He chuckled. "Your boss. She's a genius with paperwork." I smiled. "You help her?" "Of course," he bragged. "Some of those transfers. My handiwork." I pressed record on my phone under the table. He didn't stop talking. By the time he left, I had enough confession to ruin him and her. Adam played the recording 3 times, making sure every word was clear. Gerald's drunken voice slurred through the speakers, naming dates, banks, and my mother's role in every fraudulent transfer. "It's perfect," Adam said. "But we can't release it yet." "Why not?" I demanded. "She'll panic and vanish. We need to trap her publicly." He was right, but patience was agony. Every day I smiled through work while my mother flaunted her success. When Gerald came by the office again, he winked at me. "Still thinking about that drink?" "Maybe next week," I said sweetly. He grinned. "You and I could run this place better than her." "I'm sure we could," I replied, pretending not to notice the disgust rising in my throat. That night, Adam brought another piece of news. She's been invited to speak at a charity gala for her 60th birthday. I froze. "Her birthday?" He nodded. "Everyone who ever believed her will be there, donors, friends, even the press." A slow smile spread across my face. "Then that's where it ends." We spent the next week preparing the evidence, audio clips, documents, photos. Every piece of proof lined up like chess pieces ready for checkmate. "Are you ready?" Adam asked. I looked out the window at the city lights. "She declared me dead once," I said quietly. "Now she gets to see her ghost." A week before the gala, I received an invitation, addressed to Rachel Lee. I laughed when I saw it. The world believed I was still dead, yet here was my entry ticket into her celebration. I tried on 3 dresses before settling on a black one that shimmered under light. The irony of wearing funeral colors wasn't lost on me. The night before the event, I sat in the motel, staring at the gift bag on the table. Inside, I placed everything, the death certificate, the forged forms, and one final surprise, a printed photo of me at the gala's charity wall, smiling beside her. Adam came by with a flash drive. "Back up," he said. "The recording, the bank statements, everything's duplicated here." "Tomorrow," I told him, "she'll meet the daughter she buried." He nodded. "Make it count." The morning of the event, I rehearsed my lines in the mirror. My reflection looked steady, but my hands trembled. I imagined her face when she saw me. The shock, the fear, the collapse of every careful lie. That night, I arrived at the hotel where the gala was held. Laughter and music spilled into the street. I clutched the gift bag tighter. My heart beat steady, one syllable repeating in my mind, "Justice." When I walked toward the grand hall, a staff member asked, "Who should I say you are?" I smiled. Tell her, I said, a ghost came to wish her a happy birthday. The hotel lobby shimmered with golden light, the kind that made everything look expensive and unreal. Waiters moved like dancers, carrying trays of champagne. A giant banner hung above the entrance, Happy 60th, Charlotte Hart, a life of resilience and love. I nearly laughed. Resilience and love, two things she had drained out of me. I kept my head low, pretending to check my phone. Adam was stationed nearby in a black suit, blending with the crowd. Remember, he murmured through the small earpiece, no confrontation until we have all cameras ready. I'll play my part, I said softly. Guests arrived in shimmering dresses and polished shoes. Old family friends who had once held me as a baby now toasted my memory. I moved through them like fog, unseen and alive. From across the room, I saw her, my mother, in a gold gown, laughing, radiant. She hugged donors, her smile so convincing it almost fooled me again. Almost. I slipped a folded note to a waiter carrying her wine tray, deliver this at 8 p.m. sharp. Inside that note was the line that would shatter her night, to Charlotte Hart, from your loving daughter. The waiter nodded. I took a deep breath, walking toward the balcony to steady myself. Below, the city lights flickered. The sound of champagne corks echoed behind me like tiny explosions. For 10 months, I'd lived as a ghost. Tonight, the ghost would rise, smiling. At exactly 8, the music softened, and the waiter approached my mother with the folded note. She accepted it gracefully, assuming it was from one of her many admirers. She read the line once. Then twice. Her smile faltered. I stepped into the doorway, heart thundering, the gift bag in my hand. The microphone was already in her grasp, she'd been mid-toast. To those we've loved and lost, she began shakily, her eyes darting toward me. Gasps rippled across the room. Someone whispered, "Is that?" Another voice said, "That can't be her." I walked forward slowly. "Go on, Mom," I said evenly. "Don't stop now." Her hand trembled. The microphone clattered against the glass table. "You're supposed to be dead." I smiled. Surprise. Phones rose instantly. Flashes lit the room. My mother stumbled back a step, color draining from her cheeks. "This is a cruel trick," she stammered. I placed the gift bag on the table beside her cake. "You'll want to open this." The DJ cut the music. Silence swallowed the crowd. Every pair of eyes flicked between us. "This," I said, lifting the bag slightly, "is everything you used to bury me. But don't worry, it's not heavy. Lies rarely are until the truth lands on top." A murmur swept the crowd. Cameras rolled. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not of ghosts, but of exposure. The next moment stretched like slow lightning. My mother's hand hovered over the gift bag, trembling. "This isn't funny," she whispered. "Oh, I agree," I said. "Funerals rarely are." She opened the bag and froze. The document spilled onto the table, the fake death certificate, forged signatures, printed bank records. Gasps filled the room. Someone yelled, "That's fraud." Her friends edged back, their sympathy evaporating. "Emily," she hissed, her voice cracking on my name. "You're humiliating me." I leaned closer. "You did that all by yourself." She looked around wildly. "This is slander." "It's evidence," I said. The screens behind the stage flickered suddenly. Adam's doing. The projector lit up, displaying scans of her forged paperwork for everyone to see. The crowd murmured louder, some filming, others whispering accusations. A woman near the front turned to my mother. "You said she died. You collected donations in her name." My mother's hands shook so violently that her wine glass toppled, red spilling like blood across the white tablecloth. "Stop this," she cried. I didn't move. "You told the world I was gone," I said softly. "I just came back to return the favor." Right then, police sirens wailed in the distance, again. Only this time, they weren't for me. The sirens grew louder until blue lights flashed through the ballroom windows. Guests rushed to the doors, whispering, recording, feeding on the scandal like vultures. My mother stood frozen as two officers entered. "Charlotte Hart, one of them asked. She straightened her shoulders, forcing composure. There must be some mistake. Ma'am, we received evidence of insurance fraud and identity theft. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Someone shouted, "It's true. We saw the papers." I watched quietly from a few feet away. My heart didn't race anymore, it just beat steadily, calmly. The officer stepped forward. "We need you to come with us for questioning." Her voice trembled. "Who would do this to me?" I tilted my head. "A dead woman, maybe." Cameras flashed. The reporters who had once written glowing articles about her charity now snapped every tear she shed. Then, from behind the officers, Gerald appeared, sweating, disheveled, caught mid-exit. "Mr. Hayes," an officer called, "don't move." He froze. My mother turned on him instantly. "You promised this would never reach the public." He hissed, "You promised she'd stay dead." The room gasped. Every phone caught it. When the officers cuffed them both, my mother looked at me one last time, eyes wide and wet. "How could you do this to your own mother?" I smiled faintly. "You should have thought of that before you killed your own daughter." Reporters swarmed the hotel by dawn. The story exploded online before the champagne glasses were even cleared. Mother fakes daughter's death to steal benefits. Charity queen exposed as fraud. I watched it unfold from the motel TV, still wearing last night's dress. Adam sat beside me, scrolling through comments. "You're trending," he said. "I'm dead," I replied dryly. "I should be." He chuckled. "Not anymore." Footage from the gala played on repeat, me walking in with the gift bag, her stunned silence, the police leading her out. The internet called it the ultimate comeback. "Do you regret it?" Adam asked. I thought for a long moment. No. She took my name, my future, my peace. I just reclaimed all three. The phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "You don't know everything she took." My stomach clenched. "Who sent this?" Adam frowned. "Unknown ID. Maybe Gerald trying to save himself." I opened the attached image, a photo of a key inside a safety deposit envelope. My name was on it. "She hid something else," I whispered. Adam looked at me sharply. "Then we're not done." I turned off the TV. The world outside finally knew who she really was. But for me, one question still burned brighter than justice. What else had my mother stolen before she decided I was worth more dead than alive? The motel room was cold the next morning. I hadn't slept. Adam sat at the small table, the mysterious text still glowing on his phone. "A key," he said. "Could be a trap." "Or a final piece," I replied. He rubbed his temples. "Your mother's in custody. Her lawyer's already spinning the narrative, claims she's a victim of manipulation." I almost laughed. "She's had years of practice playing the victim." I pulled on a jacket. "We need to find the box." We traced the envelope's number to a bank downtown. The clerk there looked uneasy when I presented my ID. "This box is registered to Charlotte Hart," she said. "I'm her daughter," I replied evenly. The daughter, she said, was dead. Her eyes widened. A moment later, she returned with a metal box the size of a shoebox. "Sign here," she whispered. Inside the box was not money, but letters, old, sealed, bound with ribbon. The top one was addressed to me, in my father's handwriting. My breath caught. He died when I was 15. I slid the letter free, hands trembling. "My Emily," it began. "If you're reading this, it means something went wrong. Your mother and I disagreed about your inheritance. I wanted you to have the house. She had other plans." Tears blurred the words. Beneath the letters lay a stack of property documents, my father's will, and a title deed. My father had left me everything, and my mother had hidden it all. The papers smelled faintly of dust and betrayal. My father's signature curled across the pages like a promise he never got to keep. "She sold it," I whispered. "She sold the house." Adam checked the deed. "Looks like she transferred it to a company called Silver Key Holdings." I frowned. "Never heard of it." He scrolled through public records. It's fake, registered 3 months after your father died. Guess who's listed as managing partner? My chest tightened. Gerald Hayes. The same man who forged my death. I closed the box slowly. They did this together. Adam looked at me, eyes hard. They robbed you twice, your life and your legacy. That evening, I drove to the address listed on the deed. The house stood on a hill overlooking the river. My father had built it with his hands, every windowpane, every garden wall. Now, it was unrecognizable. The sign out front read Riverview Estates, Luxury Rentals. Families strolled across the lawn, children laughing where I once planted daisies. I gripped the fence until my knuckles whitened. My childhood had been turned into a business. A woman passing by smiled politely. Beautiful property, isn't it? Owned by some investors in town. I nodded numbly. Yeah, I said. I know them. That night, I stood by the gate until the streetlights came on, vowing silently, I would take it back. Every brick. Every breath of memory she stole. Adam and I sat in his car under the flickering glow of the dashboard light, the deed spread between us. You can file a lawsuit, he said. You've got the will, the forged transfer, the confession tape. She'll just find another way to slither out, I muttered. I need something public again. Unavoidable. He hesitated. There's a hearing for her bail next week. Press will be there. I looked up. Then so will I. Over the next few days, I worked on my statement. Every word I wrote burned through me like fire. I wanted people to know not just what she did, but why she thought she could. I rehearsed my lines until they no longer shook. She told the world I was dead. Now she gets to hear my voice. When the day came, I wore a plain gray suit and no makeup. The courthouse steps swarmed with cameras. Reporters shouted questions as I approached. Emily Hart, is it true you were declared deceased? Yes, I said steadily. But I got better. Laughter rippled through the crowd, uneasy and amazed. Inside, I sat behind her. She turned once, eyes empty, her hair perfectly curled even in disgrace. When the judge denied her bail, she whispered, "You'll regret this." I leaned forward slightly. I already have. But not anymore. The flash of cameras filled the room like thunder. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Headlines screamed from every feed, "Daughter exposes mother's fraud in court." "Family deception goes viral." TV anchors replayed my words. The clip of me saying, "I got better," turned into a meme. People called it poetic. I didn't laugh. For the first time, strangers believed my truth. But fame felt hollow. I walked by the river that evening, watching the sunset stain the water gold. Adam joined me with 2 coffees. "You did it," he said. "Almost," I murmured. "There's still the property." He nodded. "We'll build your case for full restitution. Once the trial starts, everything comes to light." The wind brushed my hair as I looked toward the city skyline. "I used to dream about peace," I said. "Now I dream about closure." He studied me. "You'll get both." When I returned to my motel, there was a letter slipped under my door, no return address. Inside was a single line written in elegant cursive, "Drop the case and I'll share the money. Love, Mom." I laughed softly. The gall. I held the paper over the small sink and struck a match. The flame curled it into black curls of ash. "You always loved to write my endings," I whispered. "This one's mine." Weeks passed. The trial date approached. The world had already chosen sides, some pitied her, most despised her. I stayed quiet, letting the facts speak. Adam worked late nights gathering statements, witnesses, proof. The closer we got, the lighter my chest felt. Then one morning, my lawyer called. "The judge wants to schedule your testimony for her birthday." I froze. "You're serious?" "It's coincidence," she said. "But poetic, don't you think?" That night, I stood at the window of my motel, watching the city lights flicker. Somewhere, she was sitting in a cell, still believing she could twist the truth one last time. I whispered into the glass, "You wanted every year to be about you. Fine. This one will be, too. When the day came, I walked into the courthouse again. My mother was led in wearing cuffs and a smirk. "You're still so dramatic," she muttered. I faced her squarely. "You taught me well." During the testimony, I read my father's letter aloud. The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge leaned forward. When I finished, I looked at her. "You took everything from me, except my will to return." The judge's gavel struck wood. "We'll reconvene for verdict." Outside, reporters flooded me again, microphones flashing like fireflies. This time, I didn't flinch. I'd already walked through death once, everything after was just light. Perfect, now we're entering the deep betrayal and reckoning arc, where truth collides with emotion and Emily begins to reclaim her life. Below are chapters 26 to 30, each written in first-person past tense, maintaining the tight pacing and 280 to 300 word structure for cinematic rhythm. The courthouse smelled of paper and coffee the morning the verdict came. My palms sweated despite the cool air. Reporters filled the benches, cameras waiting for the final blow. My lawyer whispered, "Stay calm. Let her hang herself with her own words." My mother took the stand first. Her voice dripped with rehearsed sorrow. "I did what I had to do," she said. My daughter struggled. "I wanted to honor her memory." "By stealing her money?" the prosecutor asked. She flinched, eyes glistening. "I never meant harm." I stared at her, remembering the forged death certificate, the empty apartment, the ashes she'd labeled as mine. When it was my turn, I rose slowly. The courtroom went quiet. "My mother didn't lose a daughter," I said. "She sold one." Her jaw tightened. I lifted my father's letter from the folder. "He left everything to me, his home, his trust, his legacy." She hid it, then declared me dead to keep it. The prosecutor nodded. "Your Honor, we submit evidence confirming this statement." The judge skimmed the documents. "Ms. Hart," he said, voice low, "this is beyond theft. It's annihilation." Her mask cracked then. For the first time, she looked small, deflated, cornered. When the gavel struck, declaring her guilty of fraud and identity theft, I didn't cheer. I simply exhaled. Justice doesn't shout, it breathes. News spread like wildfire. Mother convicted of faking daughter's death. Daughter reclaims identity in landmark case. Every outlet wanted interviews. My inbox overflowed. People called me a miracle, a symbol of resilience. But I wasn't a miracle. I was just tired of being erased. At night, I sat by the window of my temporary apartment, staring at the city lights. Adam dropped by with takeout and grinned. "You're famous." "I just wanted peace," I said. He nodded. "Fame's loud. Peace whispers." We clinked coffee cups like a small victory toast. A few days later, the court returned my father's property. I drove back to the house by the river. The gates creaked open, and I stepped through like a traveler returning from another world. The gardens were wild, overgrown with ivy. The front door stuck before opening with a sigh. Inside, dust floated in beams of afternoon light. I ran my hand along the old banister, whispering, "I'm home, Dad." In the living room, I found a photo of him on the mantel, me as a little girl on his shoulders, both of us laughing. Tears welled up. "She tried to steal this too," I said softly. "But some things can't be sold." When I turned around, Adam was in the doorway, smiling quietly. "You rebuilt more than a name, Emily. You rebuilt yourself." Reclaiming the house felt like exhaling after years underwater. But the silence inside carried ghosts. I spent days cleaning, repainting, opening windows to let the light back in. Neighbors I barely remembered stopped by with cautious smiles. "We thought you were gone," one woman said, clutching flowers. "I was," I answered. "But not anymore." The local paper printed a story titled, "Daughter Returns to Restore Family Legacy." For the first time, people weren't pitying me, they were proud. One afternoon, while sorting through boxes in the attic, I found something hidden under floorboards, an old ledger. Inside were names, dates, and amounts, people my mother had scammed over the years. Some were distant relatives, others strangers. I sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, running my fingers over the ink. She didn't stop with me, I murmured. Adam examined it later. This is big, he said. We can use it to start restitution for her other victims. I nodded. Let's make something good from all this. That night, I lit a candle by my father's photo. You left me your home, I whispered. I'll turn it into something better than what she took. The idea took root then, a charity, one built on truth, not lies. I smiled through tears. The Heart Legacy Fund, I said. This time, the name will mean something real. I reopened the house as a small office first, repainting the sign out front. The new name gleamed in gold letters, the Second Life Foundation. People thought it was poetic, appropriate for a woman who'd been declared dead. We helped victims of identity theft, financial abuse, and family fraud. Every story that walked through the door felt like a mirror. Donations poured in faster than I expected. Some came from strangers, some from those my mother had once conned. For Emily, a note would read. For the truth. I hired a small team, mostly women rebuilding their own lives. The energy was raw, hopeful. One afternoon, while I was typing reports, Adam walked in holding 2 coffees. They want you on morning television, he said. Why? To talk about forgiveness. I sighed. That word again. He smiled. You don't have to forgive her. I stared out the window. Maybe I already did, I said quietly. I just didn't do it for her. He nodded. You did it for peace. Exactly. When he left, I looked around the room, at the sunlight on the desks, at the sound of laughter from the volunteers. It wasn't revenge that rebuilt this place. It was freedom. And for the first time, freedom didn't feel like running, it felt like staying. Months later, I was invited to speak at a national conference on financial justice. I stood backstage, nerves fluttering like birds in my stomach. The audience beyond the curtain buzzed with anticipation. Adam squeezed my shoulder. You've done harder things than this, he said. He was right. I'd faced death, lies, and loss. A microphone was nothing. When the spotlight hit, I stepped forward. My name is Emily Hart, I began. 2 years ago, the world thought I was dead. My own mother made it true on paper. But here I am, proof that truth doesn't die easy. The crowd was silent, listening. I don't tell this story for revenge, I continued. I tell it because silence is where betrayal grows. If you've ever been erased, speak. If you've ever been stolen from, rebuild. Applause thundered through the hall. People stood. Some cried. Later, a young woman approached me backstage. My father took my savings, she said quietly. I didn't think anyone would believe me. I took her hand. They will now. That night, Adam and I walked by the river again. The same river where I'd once vowed to take everything back. Feels like a full circle, he said. Maybe it's just the start, I replied, smiling at the water. The morning after the conference, I woke to sunlight and silence. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel heavy, it felt earned. The news was still replaying my speech, calling it a story of resilience. Adam brought breakfast to the office. You realize you've become an advocate, right? He said, setting down coffee. I didn't plan to be. He smiled. Most heroes don't. That afternoon, I received a letter from the prison, no return name, but I knew the handwriting immediately. My mother's elegant cursive curled across the page like a snake. Emily, it began. You've humiliated me, but you're still my daughter. Drop the restitution suit and I'll share what's left. Let's end this quietly. I folded the letter and set it in my desk drawer. The paper felt like a weight from another lifetime. That evening, I burned it in the fireplace of my father's old study. The smoke curled toward the ceiling, smelling faintly of closure. Adam found me watching the ashes. What was it? He asked. An old trick, I said softly. And I'm done falling for them. Outside, the river murmured under the moonlight. For once, I didn't feel the pull of anger, just peace, warm and unfamiliar. The foundation grew faster than I imagined. Journalists called weekly, wanting updates. Survivors reached out, grateful for the voice I'd given their silence. One afternoon, a high school teacher invited me to speak to her students about honesty and resilience. They need to hear how truth wins, she said. I stood in a crowded auditorium, the microphone cold in my hand. When someone steals from you, I told them, they don't just take your money, they try to take your voice. So never let them narrate your story. The students listened, wide-eyed. Afterward, a girl approached me. Would you forgive her? She asked. I paused, thinking about my mother's eyes that last day in court, hollow yet proud. Forgiveness isn't a gift, I said gently. It's a release. I forgave her the moment I stopped needing her apology. The teacher smiled through tears. You gave them hope. That night, I replayed that conversation in my head. Maybe forgiveness wasn't softness. Maybe it was the strength to stop carrying someone else's sins. As I looked out my window, the lights from the city shimmered like small chances for redemption. I realized I no longer hated her. I just didn't owe her anything anymore. And somehow, that felt like freedom. Months passed before I saw her again. The prison warden reached out, saying she'd requested a visit. I hesitated for days before agreeing. When I arrived, the guard led me down a narrow hall that smelled of bleach and distance. My mother sat at a metal table, her hair streaked gray, her eyes sharper than I expected. Emily, she said softly, as if tasting the word. Mom. You look well. I am. We sat in silence for a while, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the gaps. Finally, she spoke. Was it worth it? Destroying everything? I met her gaze. You destroyed it, not me. I just turned the lights back on. Her jaw clenched. You've always had your father's stubbornness. I smiled faintly. And his honesty. She looked away. I never wanted to lose you. You didn't lose me, I said quietly. You gave me away, for a check. Her eyes watered then, but no tears fell. What will you do now? Live, I said simply. Something you never let me do before. When I stood to leave, she reached for my hand but stopped halfway. For the first time, we understood each other, not as mother and daughter, but as two women on opposite sides of truth. After that visit, I didn't go back. I didn't need to. The next few months were about rebuilding, not revisiting. I expanded the Foundation's programs, free counseling for victims, financial literacy workshops, legal aid. The name Second Life Foundation began appearing on local billboards. Adam worked beside me every day. You've turned pain into policy, he said one afternoon, watching volunteers hang new signage. I smiled. If we can save even one person from being erased, it's worth it. He looked thoughtful. You ever think your mother started something too? She started my story, I said. But she doesn't get to write the ending. That weekend, we hosted a gala at the restored Hart House. The same rooms that once echoed with betrayal now glowed with laughter and purpose. Reporters called it poetic. I just called it healing. When I stood to give a small speech, I said, I built this home again for everyone who's ever been told their story was over. You're proof that it isn't. The crowd applauded. Adam raised his glass. In that moment, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like the author of my own name. And that name finally meant something again. On the anniversary of my return, I drove back to the prison. Not to visit her, just to leave something behind. At the gate, I handed the guard a small box wrapped in silver paper. For inmate 3942, I said. Inside was a single photograph, me and my father by the river, smiling. Beneath it, a note, you taught me greed. He taught me love. I chose his lesson. Then I turned and walked away. That evening, Adam met me at the riverbank where everything had started. We sat on the bench as the sun dipped low. You okay? He asked. Better than okay. He smiled. You ever think about what comes next? I nodded. I used to live for revenge. Now I live for peace. He chuckled softly. Peace looks good on you. I watched the last of the sunlight ripple across the water and thought of my mother somewhere behind those walls, opening the gift. Maybe she'd understand. Maybe she wouldn't. But I didn't need her to anymore. I whispered to the wind, "You can't kill love or truth, they just learn to rise." And for the first time, I believed it. A year later, life had turned quiet again, but it was the good kind of quiet. The foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We opened 2 new centers across the state. People who'd once been victims now stood as counselors, teaching others how to rebuild. One morning, I was asked to accept an award, the Courage and Truth Honor. I laughed when I read the invitation. All I did was survive, I told Adam. He smiled. Sometimes that's the bravest thing. At the ceremony, as cameras flashed and applause filled the hall, I stepped up to the podium. "They told my story without my permission," I said. "So I took it back. This isn't just about justice, it's about memory. You can steal money, but you can't steal someone's truth." The crowd rose to its feet. When the lights dimmed, I looked at the glass plaque in my hand and thought of my father. He'd wanted his home filled with love, not lies. I hoped he could see it now, alive again, full of laughter. Later that night, Adam and I stood outside under the city's glow. "You've closed the circle," he said quietly. I looked up at the stars. Maybe. Or maybe I've just learned to draw new ones. The months that followed were peaceful, almost unreal. I spent mornings tending to the garden behind the house, the same soil my father once tilled. Tulips bloomed where weeds had once been. One afternoon, I received a call from a journalist. "We're doing a documentary," she said. "About stories of rebirth. Would you be interested?" I hesitated. The thought of revisiting everything made my chest tighten. But then I remembered the girl in the classroom who asked if I'd forgive my mother. "Yes," I said finally. "If it helps someone else find their way back." When filming began, the producer asked me, "What do you want people to take from this?" I thought for a moment. That survival isn't revenge. It's redemption. You can lose everything and still come back brighter. During the final shoot, they filmed me walking by the river at sunset. The light painted everything gold. "You look peaceful," the cameraman said. I smiled. "That's because I am." The documentary later went viral, millions watched. People wrote messages like, "You made me believe in healing again." And for the first time, I understood the difference between being known and being seen. That winter, I hosted a reunion at the foundation for everyone our work had touched. Survivors, donors, even reporters filled the hall. The air buzzed with laughter and forgiveness. As I looked around, I realized something profound. Every story in that room had once started in darkness. Now, they all shimmered with light. Adam gave a small speech. "We built this place on truth," he said, smiling at me. "And she taught us that truth, once spoken, never dies." The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was warm, steady, real. Afterward, I stood by the window, watching snow drift past the glass. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the same woman who'd walked into the birthday party a year ago. This one stood taller. Freer. I whispered softly, "You did it, Emily. You took what broke you and turned it into something that builds." Outside, lights from passing cars flickered like tiny blessings. When everyone left, I locked the doors and walked through the quiet rooms. The laughter lingered like music. I could almost hear my father's voice, "You made it right, kiddo." And for once, I let myself believe it completely. A few months later, I received another letter from the prison. No apology, no request, just one line, "You killed the old me." I folded it slowly, then tore it into pieces. "Good," I whispered. That afternoon, I walked back to the river, the place where my story had begun and ended. I sat on the same bench where I'd once promised to take everything back. But now, I didn't feel anger. I felt gratitude. A breeze rippled the water. Somewhere far away, bells chimed from a church tower. I whispered, "You didn't kill me, Mom. You just forced me to live differently." For the first time, I said it without bitterness. When I stood to leave, Adam called from behind me, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Still talking to ghosts?" "Just saying goodbye," I said. He smiled. "You're allowed to move on, you know." "I already have," I replied. We walked together down the quiet street, leaving the past exactly where it belonged, behind us. The next spring, the house bloomed again. Tulips lined the walkway. The sign at the gate gleamed in the morning light, Second Life Foundation, founded by Emily Hart. I stood by the window, tea in hand, watching volunteers arrive. Laughter drifted through the air like music. I thought about the woman who had declared me dead, the child who refused to stay buried, and the home that had risen from ashes. When a journalist later asked for one last quote for a feature story, I smiled and said, "She buried me for money, but I rose for truth." And when I walked into that room, I wasn't her daughter anymore, I was her consequence. That night, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset spill gold across the water. The wind brushed my face gently, like forgiveness passing by. I whispered, "Dad, I kept your promise. The house stands, and so do I." The chimes by the door rang softly, as if in answer. Sometimes love isn't shown by saving, it's shown by surviving. Please subscribe, like, and share for more stories like this. Thank you.